Saludos, and welcome to Ralph Reads, brought to you by TURN, the United Ronin Networks. My name is Ralph Anthony Garcia, also known as R4. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. On today's edition of Ralph Reads, I will be in continuation of this dramatic miniseries brought to you by the mind of the best-selling black writer in America, Donald Goines. Whoreson is the name of this troubling story of a ghetto pimp. Yes, y'all. Let the reading commence. Chapter 21. The street was still wet from the early evening rain. I watched the people scurrying around downtown, some rushing to catch the late buses, others just rushing home, hoping to get inside before it rained again. I parked in front of an Ofe bar and wondered if it would be interracial. Quite a few pimps from my side of town were coming downtown, cruising around the bars and copping white prostitutes that they couldn't have gotten next to before the bars integrated. Actually, I wasn't looking for a white girl to cop. What I wanted was for a white whore to hit on me to spend some money with her. That way, I'd have a chance to Georgia her out of some cock. I had 2 envelopes in my pocket, one a dummy, the other empty. If her man hadn't tightened her game up for her, she would be an easy mark to switch envelopes on. The Devil's Den was the name of the bar I finally decided to enter. It was dark inside, so I stood at the bottom of the stairs until my eyes became accustomed to the darkness. The bar curved like a half moon with a tiny stage set right off from it. I walked to the end of the bar so as to get away from the blaring noise the mixed group was playing. Apparently, the musicians thought the louder they played, the better it sounded. I took the very last stool at the end of the bar. I glanced around casually. The club was semi-crowded. Most of the customers were coupled off. The only single people at the bar were males. Before I could get up and leave, a woman stopped beside me and asked for my order. I ran my eyes up and down her body until she started blushing. She must have been all of 40 years old, a little under 5'4", a little over 120, with a body that God had built for one purpose and one purpose only, encased in a form-fitting knit dress. Her heart-shaped face with carmine mouth and huge black eyes was topped by jet black hair parted at the side, hanging long over her shoulders. Even though she was getting old, she still looked like a movie queen to me. As I stared at her, I knew that this was one white lady I was going to stick the golden rod in soon. "May I take your order, please?" she asked, still blushing. "Do you always turn that pretty pink when you wait on a customer?" I asked politely. "Well," she stated frankly, "I'm used to men looking at me, but for some reason, you have a very disconcerting stare, young man." "I hadn't meant for it to be disconcerting, miss. But when I saw you, I wondered if in this lifetime I would ever be allowed to pluck the fruit from a woman in the autumn of her years as beautiful as you are." Her eyes lit up. Before she could lower her glance, I saw the hunger in them. She wanted a young man, and I meant to find out just how much loving her capacity can stand. When she brought me back my drink, I held her hand longer than necessary. She blushed again, then looked around to see if it was noticeable. When I turned her loose, she went to the end of the bar, right up under the band, to get away from me. Several times I caught her looking back down the bar at me. 2 could play at that game as well as 1. When I finished my drink, I got up and left. I knew there wouldn't be any chance of ripping her off tonight, but it would go down anyway. I was willing to bet cash money on it. After the loud music in the bar, I really didn't want any more noise. I found the station playing soft music and left it on as I drove through the downtown district. I turned off of Woodward and drove over to Hastings. It was like entering another world. The crowded street, whores working on each corner, drunks staggering up and down the street, filth and poverty staring you in the face no matter where you looked. Once I had loved this neighborhood. Now I only tolerated it as a means to an end. One day I would drive away and never look back. At the moment, I didn't know how, but I knew that one day I would. I pulled up and parked in front of the trick house Ruby worked out of. Two girls standing in the doorway stared at me coldly. I didn't give a fuck about what they thought about me. To me, they were just something to be used. I walked past them without a glance and went up the stairs. The houseman opened the door and let me in. The dining room was full of people. A card game was going on the dining room table. Ruby, with her back to me, was pulling on a white trick's arm, trying to pull him away from the gambling and take him into a bedroom. The card dealer snarled at her. "Bitch, I done told you to leave that man alone. Don't you see he's playing blackjack?" There was something familiar about his voice. I stepped up to Ruby and put my hand on her shoulder and stared at the dealer. It was New York. After all these years, here was New York in a trick house in Detroit. There seemed to be a change about him, and as I stared at him, it hit me. His clothes. Before he had been immaculate in his dress, now there was a difference. Not too noticeable, but still there. As I stared, I noticed tiny dark spots on his gold high-low shirt. Blood. Well, if it ain't Whoreson. Fatima, baby, he spoke slowly with a slur in his voice. Do you see who I see, girl? Grown tall as a tree. Man, you done come right on up there, ain't you? Immediately after he spoke, I noticed Fatima standing behind him. If he hadn't called her name, I don't think I would have recognized her. Damn, I thought sourly, 6 years of whoring couldn't have done all that to her. She looked like a bag of bones stuck down inside a dress. Her hair was dry, while her skin had a dead color to it. As I examined her closer, I could see sores on her arm. When she looked at me, she barely opened her eyes. There was the same revealing stains on her dress. Blood spots. It dawned on me all at once. Both of them were dope fiends. Junkies. I stepped in front of Ruby. I see you still got the same habit, telling other pimps, whores, what to do. Oh, so you're a pimp now, huh? He said sarcastically. Well, I sure the fuck ain't no dope fiend, I replied coldly. His eyes narrowed, and he shuffled the cards quickly. I removed my large bankroll and pulled off a $10 bill. His hungry eyes followed the roll. I held the bill out to Ruby. Go get us both a drink, baby. She took the money from me and walked back to the kitchen. I edged over to the card table. I watched New York as he dealt the cards around to the black and white tricks. When the player in front of him asked for a hit, he pulled seconds from the deck. I knew then that the cards were marked. Why don't you take a hand, Whoreson? Give me a chance to win some of that good whore money you're so proud of, he sneered. Some of the prostitutes looked at him oddly. It was seldom that a pimp got in the game that was already rigged to rip off the tricks, unless he was a fool. I stared at the pile of money in front of New York. He had over $200 in the bank. He hit his hand and turned up 21. The other players cursed and tossed their hands on the table. I saw an ace in the discarded hands, so I reached over and began to shuffle the deck. The cards were a new bicycle deck with the fan on the back, and someone had taken a red pencil and darkened certain lines on the fan. You could see the mark all the way across the table, but you had to know what you were looking for. When I set the deck down in front of New York, I swung out with the ace and 3 other cards. While he reshuffled the deck, I palmed the 4 cards. When he set the deck down for me to cut, I reached over and split the deck in half. I set the 4 cards on top. The top card was an ace, the second was a face card, the third was another face card, and the fourth was an 8. I removed my bankroll and knocked on the table. Deal me all that money in the bank. Just 4 cards, New York. You and me. Big time. He spotted the ace on top and grinned. Okay, baby boy. Just 4 cards between you and me, he said, dealing me the second card off the top of the deck. All the girls who didn't have customers crowded around the table, watching the game silently. New York tried to get the most out of the moment. Seems as if I'm always teaching you something new, boy. This time, I'm gonna teach you never to buck a hustler's game. His lips turned down in a sneer. Ruby set my drink down in front of me, then stepped back from the table. Soon as he finished dealing, I reached over and turned up his hand without bothering to look at my cards. You got 19, boss game, I said harshly. Are you hitting it or sticking? A look of surprise came into his eyes and his expression changed. Before he could move, I reached over and picked up the money in front of him. Well, that's what I got, slick daddy, I said and stepped back from the table. My cards were still face down on the table. He reached over and snatched them up. Then slowly, it began to dawn on him that he had been played on. You never even looked at them, he stated. I ain't going for no shit like that, Whoreson, from you or any other motherfucker. Before I could reach him, he kicked over his chair and snatched up Fatima's pocketbook from the end of the table. His hand darted inside the half-open purse. As fast as he moved, Ruby had moved even faster. Her voice was chilling in the suddenly silent room. Should I stick him, Daddy? Should I stick him? There was no doubt in anyone's mind about whether or not she would stab him. They were both frozen in position. New York, with his hand half in and out of the purse. Ruby, 1 step behind him, with her long switchblade pressed to the side of his neck. As I watched in fascination, she pushed the knife deeper into his throat. A small stream of blood began to trickle down his neck. He stared up at me with his eyes pleading. Push that purse over here, I growled. He complied. I removed a snub-nosed .38 police special from the pocketbook, then stepped up and cracked him in the head with the handle. He fell out of the chair on the floor. His face was so full of fear as I walked up to him. Nigga, I said, I ain't gonna do nothing to you for the simple reason that ain't nothing I could do to you as bad as what you're doing to yourself. All I want you to do is make sure that whenever, wherever you happen to see me or my woman, you put some distance between us. As I stood there staring down on him, the years flashed back and the humiliation of what he had done to me filled my soul with shame. You might get the impression that I don't mean what I'm saying, New York, so this is just to give you the message. Before he could move, I grabbed him by his collar and began to pistol whip him about the head. When I released him, he slipped back to the floor unconscious, his face and head covered with blood. Everybody in the room was staring at me in shock. It had been a brutal act, but I wasn't ashamed. He would have shot me if it hadn't been for my woman. "Come on, Ruby," I said, and started for the door. I had the door open when Fatima caught up with us. "Whoreson," she said, "take me with you, please. I'll do whatever you want me to do, please. I'll work hard. Just let me go with you." Her pleading didn't move me at all, 'cause I didn't give a fuck about her. But the thought of slick-ass New York waking up and finding out I had taken his whore too was too good an opportunity to pass up. I nodded as she solemnly fell in behind us and followed me out to our waiting Cadillac. It had taken more than 7 years before the chance had presented itself for me to strike back in New York. But as they say, what goes around comes around. And goddamn, I felt good after getting the chance to play payback. And after glancing out of the side of my eye and seeing Fatima sitting so unconcerned against the car door, I had an idea I was going to feel a hell of a lot better after I fixed this dirty bitch's wagon. I saw the Bean Man walking down the street, so I blew at him and parked. When he got to the car window, I bought all the pills he had on him, Red Devils and Seccos and a few Dexies. Next, I stopped on Canfield and sent Ruby in to buy me a can of reefer. While she was in the house, I sent Fatima to the drugstore to purchase 2/5 of Johnny Walker Red. I watched her wave to somebody across the street, then Benny the dope pusher crossed over and followed her into the store. The bitch was getting a fix to take with her. Well, she would sure in the hell need it before I was finished with her this day. Fatima beat Ruby back to the car. When she got in, I said, "Bitch, get your ass in the back seat next to a window and keep that dope you bought in your hand. If the police break down on us, I want you to eat that shit or throw it away before they stop us." In the ghetto, any black man or woman driving a Cadillac is fair game for every policeman with a badge in his pocket. Tickets were the least of your worries. What you had to do was make sure they didn't catch you dirty. Sometimes they would stop you on just GP or to give you a bullshit ticket just so they could try and tear up your car on the pretext of searching for drugs. I had a speeding ticket in my glove compartment that I had received while sitting in front of the trick house waiting for Ruby to finish with a trick. Ruby came out of the building and ran down the stairs. She jumped in the front seat and put the window halfway down. I started the car and pulled out into traffic. I looked up and down the street closely for any police cars. If one hopped out behind me, he would have one hell of a race before he caught me, because I wouldn't stop until I gave the women time to clean up. We made it to the motel without any difficulty, and everybody relaxed. An hour later, with the 1/5 of whiskey gone, we started getting down to the nitty-gritty. Both women had removed all their clothes, while I was down to just my pants. My jewelry and bankroll were lying on the dresser beside what was left of the reefer. I staggered up from the bed and walked over to the dresser to roll another joint. In the dresser mirror, I saw Fatima run her hand up and down Ruby's body intimately. Ruby didn't seem embarrassed by the caress. I didn't allow my expression to change when I walked back towards the bed. Fatima snatched her hand back at my approach. "You didn't have to stop because of me, bitch. You done stole one whore from me. You might as well try for two." She started to make some sort of excuse, but I reached for her and she squirmed away and fell on the floor. As I started towards her, she rolled up in a ball with her arms around her head. I slowly opened my fly and pulled out my Jones. Before she knew what I was doing, I got a steady stream of piss going and spattered her head and arms. She rolled away quickly, and when I tried to hold her steady with my foot, I pissed all down my pants leg. "Bitch!" I screamed. "You done made me pee all down my pants leg!" She jumped up and ran for the bathroom. I tried to piss on her as she went by, but missed her and peed on my watch and bankroll on top of the dresser. I stared angrily at Ruby. She was sitting up in bed, laughing so hard that tears ran down her cheeks. "Bitch," I said drunkenly, "I don't see a goddamn thing funny about me pissing on myself." "I wasn't laughing at you, Whoreson," Ruby said, lying through her teeth, then started laughing again. "You don't think you messed your watch up, do you?" "Hell no," I stated, and walked over to the dresser and picked up my watch. I wiped it off on my pants, endeavoring to look stern. Suddenly, the mood hit me, and I started laughing. Maybe it was the weed. Whatever it was, I fell on the bed, and Ruby and I laughed like two fools. The sound of the shower came to us, and a little later, Fatima peeped out of the door. "Come on out, girl. I ain't gonna do nothing to you," I said slowly. She came out and stared at me angrily. "You ain't had no reason to do that to me, Whoreson." "Shut up, bitch," I said. "Here, catch." I removed a $10 bill from my roll and tossed it towards her. "Take that, bitch, and let the door hit you in the ass. I don't need you, don't want you, and wouldn't have you, so get the fuck out of here." That kind of took her by surprise. The angry look disappeared. "Whoreson, wait a minute, Daddy, and let me talk to you. I know you was mad because I left you, but we should be even now," she continued before I could interrupt. "And if you're worried about me using, I'll kick if you want me to." I sat up in bed. "Listen, Fatima, 'cause you use stuff don't mean a goddamn thing to me. I wouldn't have you no kind of way. Don't no bitch ever leave me and then come back thinking I'm gonna take her back. The truth of the matter is, I don't need you. For what? You ain't nothing. All you'd do is bring me grief, and that I don't need. Take that money, baby, and buy yourself a trip to Cloud9. Then I added, when you go out the door, woman, close it easy, please. You dirty son of a bitch, you! She yelled and ran out the door, leaving it wide open. Chapter 22. I pulled up in front of the Devil's Den and stared at the bar moodily. I have been trying for over a month now to cop Stella, the owner of the bar. It hadn't taken me long to find out she wasn't just another barmaid. I knew that she wanted me. But for some reason, she held back. I meant to break through the wall of reserve she kept putting up, and I had reason to believe I just might break luck tonight. Generally, she didn't come to the bar except on weekends. She wouldn't commit herself to a real date, but she had decided to come downtown tonight just to see me. Stella was sitting on the corner stool when I entered. "Hi," she yelled and waved in my direction. I smiled to myself. It was apparent that she had been drinking. I felt sure that half the battle was won. "Hi yourself," I said as I sat down beside her. "Did you save enough for me?" She smiled and stared at me mischievously. "Yeah, Johnny, but let's not waste our time around here drinking." Then she added as an afterthought, "You did say your name was Johnny, didn't you?" There was something about the way she said it that made me glance up immediately. She was staring at me in a peculiar manner. All at once, it came to me. She was damn near out on her feet. I felt taken aback. It wouldn't help my plan if she was too intoxicated to realize what was happening. She leaned over towards me. "Come on, honey, let's get the hell out of here." That was just down my line. I stood up and took her arm so she wouldn't stagger. The bartender gave me a cold look as we walked out, but the hell with him. He was the least of my worries. I steered her towards my car and helped her in, then got in the other side. She pushed the armrest up and slid across the seat so she could be under me. The street was nearly deserted as I drove through the downtown area. I started to stop and put the top down, then decided against it. It would sober her up too quick. I could feel her hand rubbing my leg up and down until she got up the nerve and began to massage me intimately. As far as I was concerned, that clinched things. I wouldn't have to wonder about her reactions when I pulled up in front of a motel. I stopped and bought a pint of whiskey, then headed for a motel on the outskirts of town. I wanted to make sure we weren't seen by anyone. She sat in the car and sipped on a cup of whiskey while I checked us in. "Come on, baby," I said lightly, jingling the motel key in my hand. Her skirt rose about her thighs as she got out on the driver's side. Again, I marveled at her ripened perfection. We entered the room holding each other tightly. I closed the door and kissed her passionately, then picked her up and carried her to the bed. When she returned my kiss, her tongue darted in and out of my mouth like a burning spear. Hot, stabbing jolts of sensation ran through me as I lowered her gently to the bed. I undressed her and kissed her feverishly on her neck, shoulders, and beautiful white breasts. Her nipples became so hard under my probing lips. When I went down lower and kissed her on her navel, she shuddered and her stomach grew tight. She began to murmur words of endearment as I worked down lower and lower. I proceeded to make love to her with slow deliberation, tantalizing her with the promise of joys she had never before known. Before she could become too accustomed to my love-making that way, I raised up and penetrated her at just the right time. She was tightly built, and a small scream escaped from her. I took her tiny waist in my hands and pulled her to me firmly, yet gently. Irresistibly, she clung to me in frenzied, delirious madness. "Please, Johnny, please don't stop. I've never before had an orgasm." The words came out of her in a gasp. She tossed her head from side to side, then dug her nails into my back, screamed, and shook violently. Much later, I lay back and examined her nude body as she slept beside me. I grinned to myself. I had even surpassed my own expectations while making love to her. I had evoked sensations I didn't know women had. We got up the next day, late in the afternoon. When she first awoke, I played with her until she became aroused, then made love to her again, once more, making her reach orgasm. Her eyes lit up from the fires I kindled in her. My skillful handling had given her astronomical pleasures and sexual sensations never before imagined. She was hooked. She couldn't keep her hands off me. I planned on waiting before I started to press her for money, but her behavior gave me an immediate opening. "Stella, it might be 3 or 4 weeks before I see you again," I said, starting to get a good lie together on the spur of the moment. She snatched at the bait. "Why, Johnny? Here we are just really getting acquainted and now you're telling me you've got to go?" Her hands kept rubbing intimately until I stood up and walked to the dresser. I knew then that she would become a nuisance. Whether or not it was a flaw in my makeup, I didn't know, but after I'd made love with a woman, I didn't like to be bothered. In fact, I became downright annoyed if my bed partner didn't take the hint and give me some distance. It's not that I want to go, Stella, but I got a car note due, and my rent's been overdue for the past month. I need something like $400 to get myself together. Where are you gonna go get the money at when you leave here? She asked point blank. My father owns a store in Cincinnati. If I go back home and hang around for a few weeks or months, he'll loan me the money, I added. She hesitated for a moment, then said just what I knew she would say. If you stay here, I'll loan you the money. My first reaction should have won me an Academy Award. First, I pretended shock, then became indignant. My technique was beauty in motion. I allowed her to persuade me to accept the money against my better judgment. I stated with a straight face. Her face lit up with happiness. Johnny, you stop by the bar tonight and I'll have it for you. Better yet, why don't you just let me rent this room? That way, the people down at the club won't have any idea what's happening, she continued, not giving me the time to answer. Suppose we just meet here, say around 8 o'clock. I'll have the money ready for you. 8 o'clock, hell. I could read the bitch's mind. She meant to wear me out for that 400. I'll tell you what, I got some business to take care of, so make it 10 o'clock. Before she could answer, I leaned down and kissed her. That closed the deal better than words could ever have. When she started to breathe heavy, I pulled her from the bed and slapped her on her rump. Get dressed so I can drop you off downtown in your car. If I let you, we'll still be here at 10 tonight. She grinned and ran into the shower. I relaxed a little. I don't think I could have stood another bout with her so soon. A while later, I dropped her off and continued on home. For the past weeks, I had been neglecting Ruby. I would have to give her a little attention before she got out of hand. For the next month, I played both ends against the middle. Stella had become wise to what was happening, and Ruby knew I had a square girl for her wife-in-law. Even though I tried to explain to her I was getting big stuff from my Ofe, it didn't sit right with her. I think what really dragged her was that Stella was white. Black girls just don't like to stable up with white girls, no matter how much money their pimp is getting from the Ofe, and the shoe fit the same way on the other foot. I had started a bank account now, and I had over $5,000 put up for a rainy day. 3,000 of it came from Stella in the last month. 2 days ago, I had just got $2,000 from her, and when we met tonight, I was going to hit her for some more. I stared out of the motel window. The weather was beautiful, but I didn't feel in the mood to ride down on any bitches. I had just heard on the news that Janet was back from abroad, and she had called her engagement off. That should have made me happy, but for some reason, I couldn't build up any sweat over it. Right now, Janet was in a different world from the one I lived in. I had enough problems with the 2 women I was living with to last 3 lifetimes without dragging Janet into the picture. Stella had given me an outright no bullshit choice. Either I married her or no more money. I would have fired the bitch outright, but she had sweetened the pot with the promise of $20,000 cash on the day we were married. Perhaps to some men, this wouldn't have been a problem. For me, it wasn't that simple. I was a pimp, inside and out, and marrying a bitch wasn't in my program. Stella had presented the opportunity, and I meant to take advantage of it. If the bitch didn't think I could play her out for that money, she was crazy. I didn't have it absolutely together, but I had a plan. The phone rang. I picked up the receiver and spoke for a few moments, then hung up. I smiled. It was coming together. The pieces were falling into place. I put 2 joints in my pocket and stepped outside. It was just dusk dark, not too hot or cold. I let the top down on my caddy and headed for the west side. I appreciated this big, expensive car as I drove across town. When I stopped at a red light, 4 teenage girls waiting for the bus flagged me down. The women standing at the bus stop stuck their noses in the air as the young girls ran over and climbed in my car. Those old bitches were just mad because I didn't pick them up. All the teenagers had on shorts, and I mean short shorts. The young girl who sat down in the front seat beside me had big, pretty brown thighs, and I stared at them in appreciation. "Hey baby, this sure is a hip ride, ain't it?" one of the girls in the back yelled. I caught her reflection in the mirror, and she didn't look to be over 13. "You need a woman, honey?" she asked. I smiled at their frankness. "No, honey, you might be too old for me," I capped right back. She grinned. "If you was to get some of this hot stuff I got, I bet you wouldn't think that." I laughed out loud. You probably got a point there. One of the girls in the front seat began to turn the knob until she found a soul music station. They all began to dance in their seats and pop their fingers to the music. When I got to 12th and Warren, both of the girls in the back seat got out. 4 blocks later, the one sitting by the door in front yelled out it was her stop. After letting her out, I turned to the one beside me. "How far do you go, honey?" I asked. "I go all the way over to Linwood, if you're going that far," she replied. "I got to make a stop first, baby. Then I'll take you on home. That is, if you ain't in a big hurry." She looked up at me out of some of the prettiest eyes. "What are you, Mexican or something?" I laughed. "No, baby, I'm not a Mexican, but you can bet I'm something." When she laughed, it wasn't the laugh of a child. It was the sound of a young, healthy woman coming into her own. She hadn't bothered to move over to the vacant spot by the door either. She sat right up under me as though she belonged to me. Her behavior led me to believe we might make one hell of an evening out of it yet. One way or another, it would amount to pure delight to lay up with this young devil, cute and tender. I pulled up in front of a pool room on Warren and stopped. One of the loafers in the doorway walked over to the car. Before he reached it, I got out and met him on the sidewalk. "Preacher, baby, I seen them white folks finally let you out." Preacher grinned. He was a short, fat, dark-skinned Negro with a deep, booming voice. "Yeah, baby, them honkies damn near got the nitty from the gritty before they let me out. Man, 5 years in that place without nothing but some fags to help you pass the time ain't my kind of cup of tea." I took him by the arm and walked him away from the car and pool room. "Dig, baby," I said. "I got a thing on the fire, and if you help me take it off, I'll give you $1,000. He stopped and looked at me closely. "You know I'm still on parole, Whoreson, so I can't stand no stick-ups, baby. But other than putting that candy stick in my hand, you got your man." "It ain't no stick-up," I said and grinned. "And you ain't got to crack no heads." I studied him for a moment. "You know, I got to thinking about you, preacher, and about how you used to carry that Bible around up there in the joint and went to wondering if you brought it home with you." He smiled. "Man, when I got out, I gave it to the screw at dress out. I told that honky he should try reading it. He might find something in it to help him." "What about all that bullshit you used to talk up there in the yard, preacher? What happened to all your plans on starting you a church and trimming all them sisters out of their money? You done forgot about it already, huh?" He scratched his nose. "No, baby, I ain't forgot. I just ain't got no green to get started. I sent all the way to California to get me some bullshit license stating I'm an ordained preacher, man. But it ain't doing me no good, Whoreson. I ain't got no money to get started with." 2 old women passed us. "Just look, man, all them sisters just waiting for me to trim them, and I can't get my goddamn church off the ground." "Well, dig this, preacher. I've got good news for you." I put my arm around his shoulder. "How much would it take for us to rent a storefront, put a second-hand organ in it, and a few chairs so we could get by for a few days?" "What's this few days shit, Whoreson? If we get up, we might as well go for the long gallop." "That part of it is impossible, baby, and I want you to realize it," I said sharply. I'm getting ready to play stuff on an old white bitch, and as soon as I take off the cash, she gonna run to the man. But you'll have at least 24 hours to get what you want out of the joint and get in the wind. We walked together until we came to a drugstore. Wait a minute, preacher. I might as well run in here and cop some things I'm gonna need. He followed me into the store. I walked around the counter and found some white envelopes. No one was watching except Preacher, so I pulled 2 loose from the pack and put them in my inside pocket. We walked over to the stamp machine at the beer and wine counter, and I bought 2 stamps and put them on the envelopes. Preacher looked at the wine counter wistfully. "You want to kill a fifth with me?" I asked. "Do I want to get rich? Do I want to go to heaven? Ask me that, Whoreson, but don't ask me about a bottle of wine. You know goddamn well I want some sweet red." I bought 2 bottles and we walked back towards the car. "Man, don't tell me you gon' play on that young kid in your car, Whoreson. Don't look at me like that, preacher. All I'm doing is keeping my game tight." He snorted. "Game tight hell, man. All you want to do is Georgia that young kid. That ain't cunt, man. That's still pee-hole." I looked at him in disgust. "Looks to me like you read too much of that goddamn holy book while you was doing your last bit." He studied me closely. "You ain't changed none, Whoreson. I had forgot that you was a genuine snake. King Cobra out this motherfucker." He continued as though he was reading the gospel. "The white race won't have you, and the black race don't want you. Fuck you, nigga, in your black ass," I stated angrily. He ignored me and opened the wine and took a long drink, then passed me the bottle. "I remember, Whoreson, while we was in the joint, you was strange fruit. While some of the dogs ran around raping white boys, you went them one better. You raped white and colored. It didn't make you no difference. If you saw a weak man, he was gonna be had." I turned up the bottle and drank deep and long before replying. "That was only because I was young and wild, preacher. You can't hold that against me." He shrugged his wide shoulders. "I don't hold nothing against you. It ain't my place to judge, nor would I judge you if I could. I done did some rank things in my life too, but I ain't never tampered with no child." I cursed. "Call me in the morning, man, if you ain't changed your righteous mind." I gave him the open bottle and walked on over to my car. She greeted me as soon as I got in the car. "I thought for a minute you was gonna stay up here all night." I set the second wine bottle down between her legs. She opened the bag and sniffed. "Shit, I don't drink no wine, man. I drink scotch, mister. I don't drink nobody's wine." "Just pour me a cup of wine, girl. I didn't hear nobody say it was for you, did you?" She poured out 2 cups full and drank hers down fast. As soon as I caught a gap in traffic, I pulled away from the curb and stared at her thighs again. Shit, preacher had to be insane. This damn sure wasn't no child. She spoke up suddenly. "We sure had some good pot yesterday. My cousin's boyfriend brought some home when he came home on leave, and it sure was good." On the left side of the street, I saw a gas station and pulled up in the driveway. "Fill it up," I yelled to the attendant. I removed my bankroll and fanned it out, making it look larger than it was. Her eyes grew big. "Damn, I ain't never seen so much money. What you do for a living? Stick up people?" Slowly, I removed a $100 bill from the roll and dropped it in her lap. "How would you like to have that for your very own?" I asked lightly. Surprise and greed leapt from her eyes. "You wouldn't give that to me, would you?" she asked in a husky voice. "It's all yours if you want it," I replied softly. "What would I have to do for it?" she asked. I smiled coldly to myself. There was the bait, and she was nibbling at it greedily. I put my hand down between her legs and rubbed her intimately. She didn't pull away or resist. No, she said, more to herself than to me. If you gave me that money, you just take it back as soon as you got through doing whatever you wanted to do. The gas station attendant came to the window and I paid him. I'll tell you what I'll do, honey. I'll let you put the money in an envelope and mail it to your mother. Or if you want, mail it to yourself. The fish was caught. She leapt clear out of the water. I ain't gonna mail nothing to my mother because she wouldn't give it back to me. I pulled an envelope out of my pocket and handed it to her. She stared at it for a moment. Put the money in it, I said quietly. She dropped the bill inside it as if in a trance. Now close it up and seal it, I said, leading her right down the road to the butcher shop. She wet it with her tongue and sealed it. Here, let me see if you got that sealed right. I removed the envelope from her hand, made my switch, and handed her the dummy back. Yeah, it's sealed. Reach in the glove compartment and get a pencil out and put your name and address on it. She started to hand it back to me, but I refused. No, baby, I don't want you to give me the envelope. I don't want you to get the notion I might switch on you, so you hold on to it. You know the money's in it now. She clutched the envelope to her. I never did nothing like this before, she said while writing out her address. I drove slowly and watched for a mailbox. When I saw one, I parked beside it. Well, baby, here we are. She looked scared for a moment. You sure you want to go through with this? She stalled. Give me back my money then, if you don't want to go through with it, I said, bluffing. She bit down on her lip. How long have I got to be with you? About 5 minutes. It shouldn't take longer than that, should it? I asked, amused. I don't know. Should it? She replied. I could tell she was way out of her program. When I reached for the envelope, she opened the door and got out hesitantly. I watched her closely until she mailed the letter. If she had tried to run, I'd have run her little ass down and probably jumped on her for trying to put shit on me. She climbed back in the car and sat over by the door nervously. I put my foot in the gas tank, making a beeline for the nearest motel. Even though I had 2 motel rooms, I wasn't about to take this tender young thing to one of them and have one of my war horses walk in on me. I pulled up behind the hotel on Linwood. When she saw me park, she shook her head. I ain't going in that place. Well, I don't know what you're planning on doing, girl. You done took my money, and I guess you know I can't get it back out no mailbox. She shook her head. I know that. I just ain't going none of them motels. What do you want to do then? I asked. Do it in the car someplace? I don't care, she answered in a frightened voice. For a few moments, I just sat and thought about that. Well, it wouldn't save me the motel money, I reasoned. It was good and dark now, so I wouldn't have any difficulty finding a good spot to rip this sweet meat off. I slammed the car in gear and backed out. After my third alley, I found just what I was looking for, an old, dilapidated garage with the house vacant. I thumbed up into it and pointed to the back seat with my thumb. Climb over the seat, I directed. I wasn't taking any chance of her getting away this close to the finish line. She climbed over obediently, then sat in the corner like a frightened kid. Take them shorts off, everything, I growled. I removed my sport coat, shoes, shirt, then climbed over the seat. She hadn't taken anything off, so I straightened her out on the seat and removed her shorts and pants. The sight of such a young, tender thing excited me, so I just stripped her down. Her breasts were small and hard, and I kissed them affectionately. My breathing became deep and broken as that beautiful sight aroused me. When I put my finger inside of her, she began to cry, but I was beyond any feelings of concern. I unzipped my zipper. She became aware of what was about to happen and cried, Wait, I didn't tell you, but I ain't but 16. At that moment, it wouldn't have mattered if she wasn't but 10. I was beyond the point of caring. I removed my finger and used it to guide myself with. She screamed piercingly as I entered her, causing me to come instantly. Damn, I swore, sat up. Instant cock. I could make a fortune off of you on the market. I straightened up my clothes and climbed back in the front seat. She sat in the corner, slowly dressing. You hurt me, she said angrily. You hurt my pocket. You ever think about that? I said, amused. She smiled. Now that her ordeal was over, she was happy. I'm going downtown and buy me 10 dresses when my money arrives. For a moment, my conscience nagged me, but not enough to make me part with $100. Would you do that for another $100 bill? I asked curiously. She hesitated for a moment. If you promise to do it as fast as the first time, she replied coldly. I started to laugh and continued to laugh until she climbed up in the front seat. I don't see nothing funny. What's so damn funny? She asked and punched me in the side. Nothing, I said, holding back my laughter. I pulled out my bankroll and gave her a $5 bill. I'm going to put you out at the bus stop. You can either take a car or catch the bus. Suit yourself. I just don't have the time to drop you off. She clutched the 5 spot to her. Do you always spend this kind of money on the girls you go out with? She asked. When I didn't answer, she continued. If you want my address, I'll write it down for you. I looked at her and smiled. No, thank you, honey. When you get old enough, I might run into you somewhere. When I pulled up in front of the bus stop, I looked at her and said, instant cock, and began to laugh until my sides hurt. She looked at me and shook her head. When she got out of the car, she was smiling to herself. Chapter 23. The waitress brought my dinner and walked away, her hips moving provokingly. Her walk had the same effect on the men sitting around the restaurant as a snake swaying back and forth would have on a bird. I glanced at my watch again. 3 more hours. Stella had met Preacher twice now. This evening was the night for the big play. She had been to the false church we had tossed up and accepted it without too much fuss. After she saw his license, she had been almost convinced. And when I took her by his church one evening and she walked in on a fake marriage, all doubt left her mind. She was more than ready to have him marry us. And when he put her off, causing us to postpone it another day, she started sleeping the sleep of the contented. Getting a young man almost half her age was a middle-aged woman's dream. Impatiently, I glanced at my watch again. The door opened and Boots walked in. I stared at her coldly as she spotted me and started to walk over to my table. She hesitated for a minute. Do you mind if I sit down with you? Her carriage was as proud as ever. She walked as though she possessed something other women didn't have. She was the floating dream of many a man. If you're not afraid of someone telling your old man about us being together, knock yourself out and sit down. I watched her closely as she pulled out a chair. There was something on her mind. She wouldn't dare arouse Tony's displeasure unless she had something important worrying her. I remained silent, waiting for her to speak. Well, Whoreson, I heard about your bad luck. I'm sorry to hear that Ruby ran off. Yeah, I can just look at you and see it, I said sarcastically. The sleepless morning a week before when I awoke to find that Ruby hadn't come home. My frantic telephone calls, first to women's division at the police station, then the hospital. The fear that something had happened to her. All this and more rushed back to me because of her comment. But to hell with Ruby, I thought. It was good riddance. I had bigger plans. Perhaps I didn't say that quite right, Boots began again. What I really wanted to know, Whoreson, is what you plan on doing now that you ain't got nobody. For some reason, bitch, I can't seem to figure out where you're coming from. You know without my telling you that ain't none of your business. But you still wouldn't put yourself on Front Street for that reason. What's the real deal? You done got fed up with the large stable you're living in? Or is it that Tony wouldn't dare make a black bitch his main woman over all them white girls he got, huh? She stared around the restaurant with unseeing eyes. I knew I had hit the tender spot. Since you're so curious, I went on, I'll tell you my plans. Sometime in the morning, I'm going to pack my bags and hit the highway. I haven't made up my mind yet to where I'm going, but Detroit will be 300 miles behind me this time tomorrow. It would have been impossible for a blind man not to see that my words hit home. She let out her breath slowly. Take me with you, Whoreson. If you do, I'll be yours for life. Why? I asked her point blank. The question caught her by surprise. She looked up at me sincerely. Why? I'll tell you why. Tony don't need me. All he needs is a banker. That's all I am to him. Somewhere in the back of my mind, her words rang a bell. Banker? What you talking about, Boots? With a sigh, she began to talk, and I listened close. You know, you and Tony got a lot of ways alike. Maybe that's why I picked him while you was gone. Anyway, he's always gambling, so he don't put all of his money in the bank. He gives it to me to put up for him in case he runs into a crap game or something out in the street. That seems to be all I can do for him nowadays. Just hold his money. How much? I asked softly. She hesitated for just a second. $6,000. He said he was going to buy his new Cadillac with it. Where is it? Her eyes met mine for a moment. Then she looked away. I got it put up at my apartment. She caught her breath and asked, Are you really leaving in the morning, Whoreson? The jukebox began to play the number by John Coltrane, These Foolish Things. I sat back and smiled. What goes around comes around. I could see it in the bitch's eyes. That money belonged to me. All you gotta do is walk out to my car and open the trunk. All my clothes are already packed, sitting out there waiting for me to ride out. Her voice was hoarse. Let's get up and walk out and make one stop. I'll run in and get the money, and then we can hit the highway right now, Whoreson. I'll give you every penny of it. She stopped long enough to get her breath. It don't make no difference when we leave. If you was going, we can just as well leave now. Now that was just like a bitch, I thought to myself coldly. She didn't stop to think that I might have some business on my own to take care of. I knew she was on the borderline and could jump either way, so I pushed her. I wasn't going to allow her time to think, because if she did, she might change her mind about the money. She knew as well as I did that once she took that money, Tony would break her back, wherever he found her. Her only chance would be to put many miles between her and Tony. I manipulated her like a puppy on a leash. Let's go, I said sharply, not giving her time to reason. She stood up bewildered. Where? She asked in a shocked voice. The people at the tables and the counter watched us closely as we left. There would be much talk, and it wouldn't be long before Tony was informed about us leaving together. If I knew Tony, he'd make a beeline for his money stash. No pimp with anything on the ball would trust his woman in the company of her ex-pimp. There was no time for any bullshit, so I drove straight to her apartment. Get the money and whatever clothes you can toss together at once, I ordered. She jumped out of the car and ran up the stairs. I glanced at my watch. I wasn't afraid of Tony, but I didn't want any static from him until I got that money in my pocket. After that, I didn't give a damn what he did. I wasn't planning on kicking back no $6,000 either. It didn't take her long. She came out with 2 suitcases under her arms, walking fast. Before she got to the car, another girl came out of the building behind her and ran down the steps. Their voices came drifting to me. Boots, you know what you're doing, girl? Tony gonna kill you. At least leave his money. You know how he is about that. Boots hesitated. I yelled out the window. Bitch, if you don't get your ass in this car, I'm gonna kill you myself. I stared at the girl holding Boots' arm. And if you don't turn her arm loose and get the hell out of my game, bitch, I'll get out of here and break those funky little legs. She released Boots. I know you, Whoreson. I'm going to tell Tony just what you said. It don't make me no difference if you tell your black ass mammy, bitch! I yelled and jumped out of the car. Boots ran over and pushed her suitcases into the back seat. I climbed back in and started the car up. Set it out, woman, I said, and held my hand out for the money. If you have never had a woman give you $6,000, it will be hard to understand what I felt at that moment. When she set that money in my hand, it was like I had just taken a heavy drug. The blood raced to my head, and I believed I owned the world. How sweet it is! Where we going, Whoreson? She asked. She had tried to sound cheerful, but I could feel the fear gnawing at her. I couldn't blame her. I knew that I was the only thing between her and a broken back. If she had had a hint of what I was thinking, she would have jumped out and run for dear life. I hadn't made up my mind yet on what to do with her, but one thing was sure. Whenever I told a whore they couldn't leave me and come back, I meant every word of it. I wasn't a bus driver. A bitch couldn't catch a ride with me whenever she made up her mind to do it. Since I didn't want any trouble from Tony until I took off my big sting, I found a motel on the outskirts. Boots' eyes got big as I pulled up and parked. We ain't gonna check in here, are we? Well, I don't know what the hell you're gonna do, but I'm sure in the hell gonna check in, I said. She stared at me angrily. Whoreson, you lied to me just to get your hands on Tony's money? I leaned over and slapped the shit out of her. First, bitch, don't you call me no liar. Second, it ain't Tony's money, it's my money. Whatever inconvenience the bitch was going to cause me, I had to put up with for at least the next few hours. She followed me docilely into the motel. I checked us in and we settled down. I made her go out and get her bags. When she returned, I was counting my money. She glared at me. Listen, whore, I ain't about to have you walking around me rolling your eyes, so just keep all them goddamn funny looks to yourself. Being cruel to her was really unnecessary. This was the first time in my life I had ever seen her broken. There was no doubt in my mind about that. She was completely lost. Her head hung down and she looked at me sadly. Why, Whoreson? Why? What did I ever do to you to make you want to do this to me? When I was with you, I gave you every penny I ever made. Don't that mean something to you? Her voice broke. She started crying silently. What is it, Whoreson? What is it? Do you hate women or something like that? A man just don't be cruel like you're being for no reason at all. Bitch, let me tell you something. Your tears, your name calling, it ain't nothing but humorous to me. You can talk from now on. It ain't gonna mean a thing. 'Cause as far as one of you funky bitches is concerned, my understanding is completely zero. For several minutes, she just stared at me. I guess you can be tough when a woman's concerned, but I wonder how you'll act if Tony rides down on you. If you trying to make me mad, Boots, forget it. I got Tony's money in my pocket, and if he rides down on me, it's gonna still stay in my pocket. She swore bitterly. God damn it, you Detroit niggas ain't no earthly good. With a jerk, she pulled her blouse off, then loosened her bra. I watched her coldly as she wiggled out of her skirt and panties. Without a backward look, she marched off towards the shower. The sound of running water filled the room. I stretched out on the bed. I still had 2 hours to go before picking up Stella. We will have to arrive at the church at the exact minute. I went over my plan again. Everything depended on the timing. Preacher had a bunch of wineheads lined up. He promised them $10 each just to sit in the church so I could figure on it being full when we arrived. Boots came out of the bathroom and laid down on the bed beside me. I had taken my shirt off to get comfortable. She twisted around so that her head was on my chest. Her hands began to wander up and down, promising temporary pleasure. Her body was too tempting, even after so many years. I got up and went in and took a shower. When I returned, she stared at me strangely. I didn't mind. I dressed slowly, putting on a midnight blue silk suit with a powder blue shirt. She remained silent as I dressed. When I finished, I said, "I'll be back sometime in the morning. If you ain't here, I'll figure you done rode out. Do whatever you want to do. It's your decision." She watched me silently as I went out the door. To me, it didn't really make a difference. She could stay or leave. We have reached the end to this part of the miniseries on Ralph Reads. I would like to thank you, queens and kings, fellow royalty, for stopping by. You may connect with me on Twitter and Instagram, as well as Periscope at rgmc2407. Drop me an email at rgmc2407@gmail.com, where you may leave a small donation via Zelle or paypal.me/rgmc2407 or the Cash App. My cash tag is rgmc2407. You may also find me on my very own channel, RGMC, Ralph Garcia, Master of Ceremonies, as well as right here at home on the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. Fellow royalty, pick up a good book, read a good story, and set your good self free. I appreciate you, and I love you like cooked food. I will see you good folks on the next edition of Ralph Reads. Hasta luego.